Thank you, first of all, foremost, for having me. This is going to be 20 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back, so let's go. All right. Identities. We all have them, right? Justin said that I'm a very well-respected individual in the community. I've also been called a cocky, opinionated asshole, but I'm pretty sure that's only my wife that calls me that. We all know this brewery, right? Pretty sure we can also say that we agree that they stand for many things and that they're great and a great part of the innovative culture of brewing and craft beer for a very long time. I don't think any of us see them changing their identity anytime soon. It is, for me, the paradigm of a brewery with an ironclad sense of its true roots. For me, they never appear lost in their operations. Did you know they have a kombucha project they're working on? For the longest time, we knew what craft was. It looked like this. Craft evolved like rock and roll, continually giving the middle finger to the man who peddled blandness at every tavern and store. In our formative years, craft was loud, moderately tolerated, and thankfully it kept showing up, kind of like these guys. But recently, I feel craft has entered a seriously awkward phase. We're swimming in a sea of spandex, trying to tread water, all the while worried that our hair might need more Aquanet, and somehow lipstick is part of the equation. I'm not surprised. True North moved for rock and roll as it too evolved before entering its own awkward phase. Luckily, grunge came along and saved the day. But until our own personal grunge Lord and Savior arrives, a bunch of us are doing our best work to keep our companies moving forward. I hope our friends considering new paths for their businesses don't forget to look in the mirror. I too was an awkward teenager once. But let's not forget, this shit's gotten real, and faking it till you make it might not pay the bills like it used to. I get that. Try being the Lost Abbey and telling your distributor you want them to sell 750 milliliter cork-finished bottles. Since the creation of craft beer, we have always had an enemy to point to and say, that is not us. Our narrative has always relied on a good versus evil sense of things. And since the beginning, bigger beer has always been in our crosshairs. We have always been able to point at the largest companies and say, we aren't that. But along the way, they started using the word craft without reservation, and even went out and purchased breweries from our friends. Like many of you, I wonder if it's even a defendable narrative anymore. Yet, we need an enemy, and lately it's looked like cannabis was threatening, but I'm not feeling that right now. We're still not sure if seltzer is a real thing, or this summer's speed bump. But try telling that to the guys investing $385 million more to stay out in front. That really doesn't sound like disruption if you ask me. Sounds like some serious doubling down. Let that sink in for just a minute. They have the number one position in the hottest category, and they're investing nearly $400 million more to stay there. Do any of us really want to go mano a mano with that behemoth? I woke up this morning prepared to tell you that seltzer is the new enemy of craft. But wait, we have craft seltzer too. Kudos to Boston Beer for getting involved in a thing before any of us knew it was a thing. Thank God seltzer has arrived and brought with it a stunning sense of terroir. I don't know about you, but I, for one, can't wait to read stories about third-generation dextrose farmers. That reminds me, is terroir even a thing anymore? Can influencers even spell it? Maybe the enemy of craft is technology and a generation of tickers who think that drinking 4-ounce untapped splashes is how real beer is consumed. We can't blame them, but sometimes it sure does feel like we're at odds with our consumer base. Anyone else in the room pissed off at the juice companies? I say we start a campaign to call out the juice box producers who handed us this generation of non-bitter drinking sugar babies. Lately, I've come to wonder if maybe the enemy of us is actually us, in our own worst enemy kind of way. Maybe today's enemy of craft is the lack of progression that came from too many people being taught the Rosetta Stone version of how to brew better beer. Perhaps we've been too collegial. Maybe we sang Kumbaya one too many times. Some years ago, I had a conversation with my friend Vinny. I half-jokingly told him he should stop teaching everyone how Russian River made their sour beers. For in it, I was worried that there would be a whole generation of brewers who never figured it out on their own. In handing over this information, there might not be any real progression. Trial and error brought us to this place we call craft. Copying on the final exam did not. Turns out during that time, kettle sours became a thing, so I was kind of wrong about that. I think another enemy might have arrived in the form of ubiquity. Here's a slide of a flight of IPA, and another, and another. Maybe sometimes like Maybe sometimes you feel like me, the new enemy of craft is the ubiquity we've developed along the way. Is this sameness that's derailing our momentum? Is it possible our final destination is right in front of us? Perhaps we're experiencing an airplane-like moment where the plane's arriving terminal keeps changing before crashing to a halt. Is this what happens to a cottage industry when it isn't so cottage anymore? Without white spaces available to everyone, what are our options? What boundaries are left to be explored? From our infancy until today, craft beer has exploded in ways no one could have imagined. It became a global movement, and now you can purchase barrel-aged Saison in Argentina. So mission accomplished, we made flavor important again. But flavor is everywhere, and the pendulum of ubiquity is threatening a return, stagnating our industry. Today, we have the largest sheer number of breweries, flavors, and opportunities to drink amazing liquid in, I don't know, almost ever. And yet I'm feeling many of us are staring at the crossroads, our identity crossroads. It's very disconcerting, to say the least. We've clogged the retail channel, flooded our distributors with the same beers, and all the while made beer increasingly more perishable. Is it possible we innovated the consumer into a sense of craft beer constipation? And with apologies for all of you in the room, I'm not packing the Pepto-Bismol we all need. Still, how do we stand pat in a sea of changing landscapes? If we have a definition for craft brewer, does that definition need to allow for craft beverage companies? Are we supposed to scream, "Get off my lawn," at anyone making alternative liquids, somehow believing the essence of our very being and soul no longer requires the skillful use of hops? Maybe that too causes you to ponder retirement. Hard seltzer doesn't require hops. How do you think the hop farmers feel about that? Since our inception, we have all banged the rallying drum. We must educate our consumers on our stories, our flavors, and points of differentiation. Anyone else in the room feel like these are the least educated consumers we've ever sold to? Sure feels like it to me. Lately, I keep running into consumers who have no use for our backstories, and the illusion that we all walked 8 miles uphill to school in the snow on our way to getting here is even remotely interesting to them. It's cute, I know. Craft brewing had it easy. The movement launched in Northern California in the late 1970s. It found a nearly infinite amount of white space to plant the seeds of new operations, cultivate more consumers, and for the most part, there was always a plethora of bounties for everyone to reap what we sowed. But from here, it feels like that white space has eroded. Kim Jordan famously gave the keynote at the 2003 Craft Brewers Conference in New Orleans. In her speech, she implored us to continue on our path to 10% market share. She preached unity, and collectively the tide would lift all. And it did. Kim returned in 2013 and doubled down on a growth goal of 20% by 2020. In this way, she outlined a very audacious goal, yet it seemed incredibly tenable. Our unity was the driver, the consumer voracious, and success was being had on every street corner. In short, as an industry, we were going lots of places, and we were definitely all living the good life. 2011 brought us the Great Chicago Earthquake, and the fissures in the market appeared when Goose Island became the first craft brewery to cross to the other side of the aisle. Since then, the island of misfit toys keeps growing larger. Seems a bunch of real estate on that island comes with oceanfront views. The BA craft beer definition is often derided for being a moving target. The level of real estate and barrels that have transacted in the past 10 years is certainly more than most people thought imaginable. This much is obvious. 10 years ago, Greg Cook and Red Tail Media released the video, "I Am a Craft Brewer." In it, we see numerous iconic breweries celebrating our similarities and the pathways to being part of the club. In the video, it's clear what it means to be a craft brewer. You must illuminate your strengths, keep your standards, educate those who would seek to obscure the truth, and push the boundaries. It was textbook craft beer idealism, and it read like a playbook for our future. When we launched the Lost Abbey in 2006, we branded our beers for sinners and saints alike. We wanted the world to know that no one was free from the temptation of sin. If you pay attention to the craft brewer video, you see deadly sins that were committed in the years since its release. I don't think Greg's intention was a prophecy of doom and gloom, but it shows some serious biblical deadly sins coming to fruition. Gluttony comes to mind in the form of overzealous brewery owners expanding too big. Sloth certainly came to play. Brewers getting left behind in the rearview mirror because they rested for too long on their laurels. Lust came calling, and some brewers had to take the check. The sirens were much too persuasive. And of course, pride showed up and reminded plenty of owners that running businesses can be tough pills for egos to swallow. 2006 was a lifetime ago for craft brewing, especially for brewery owners in San Diego. In the very distant past of 13 years, our largest obligation was to the authenticity by which we launched ourselves, and the liquids we produced were our uniquely coded DNA. In the past few years, friends of mine sold for $1 billion, others opened and closed a brewery in Germany, and the fourth largest brewery in town was foreclosed on by their bank. During this heyday, we were the poster children of craft being done right. Today, we're a little less shiny, but perhaps more realistic in our zeal. Many of you probably share this sentiment as well. We routinely hear that there are 10,000 wineries in this country and that there must be room for 10,000 breweries. And given the number of breweries in this country making less than 1,000 barrels of beer, it seems totally plausible. Let's also not forget that wineries have amazing direct-to-consumer options. To our friends at the BA, it might be time to finally get going on that. However, on the surface, there are also larger problems at work here. We've been too busy imitating each other and not pulling enough people into our spaces. I don't think I have to be the one telling you we're running out of middle-aged white dudes with beards to sell our beer to. Lately, in my quest to understand this industry, I've been focused on this one question. If we launched our brewery right now, how different would it look? Luckily, self-introspection is free and a great illuminator sometimes. I often come back to the same answer. The industry changed right before our eyes. We went from zeros to heroes and built something amazing. But opening today would be fucking nuts. 13 years after starting our brewery, I stand before you very much a craft brewer. I know this because I'm small and equally as independent as the day we opened our doors. The struggle continues to be incredibly real. Some of the largest brewing companies who appeared in the video have shifted their focus, and a few even sold. I don't begrudge any of them, and I won't. I've never walked a mile in their shoes. Maybe someday in the future there will be a company who wants to buy our beers and brands. Isn't that the American dream? Of course, with our industry's headwinds, that might never happen. It's scary, I know. I have said it before in the past, and it bears repeating here. We are all in the business of staying in business, and that used to be easy. Just make amazing liquid, and they will come. Lately, we're seeing the effects of banks and private equity who bet on growth, resulting in the all-too-familiar situation like the paper boy in Better Off Dead, looking to extract his $2 pounds of flesh. At least he was the devil you knew. But what happens when the reliable consumer suddenly starts consuming elsewhere? How about the distributor we aligned with? And of course, our brothers and sisters in arms who charted new courses and sailed away. How do we as captains of these vessels navigate the turbid waters? What safety measures did we implement to sail through these turbulent seas? Some of my friends were forced to deploy emergency life rafts to save the vessels and their employees. So it got me wondering, what's worse, selling off to the highest bidder, turning yourself into a beverage company making odorless liquids, or just closing the doors and saying we had a good run? All of them are options available to any of us. Success has never been guaranteed. Right now, my company is making the best beer in our existence, and yet the headwinds are profound. It's obvious many of us are mired in slumps, having held to our convictions and brand positions for far too long. Great beer, craft beer, authentic beer, call it what you like, has never seen this level of competition. But ask yourself, what's the cost to pivot in a time of irrational exuberance and consumers supporting alternative liquids? Is recalibrating your true north something you should be doing every 2 years? I think there is one question that every brewery owner should be asking themselves when they look at that in the mirror. And that should be, what is my authentic alternative? History has shown us that craft has always been the authentic alternative to blandness. But is it our future? I'm not going to discount what was once an obvious playbook no longer behaves that way. We cannot for a moment think there's enough white space to innovate our way out of this funk. If we're going to turn the proverbial corner, we're going to need new consumers. I'm doubtful that this is news to any of you. But if anything should be self-evident right now, many of these people don't care for the flavors of beer we proudly have spent our lives creating. If so, they would be in our tasting rooms and restaurants. The Lost Abbey has seen a massive erosion in our core business. In that way, I've been guilty of sloth and trying to be patient in this sea of FOMO. But we position Lost Abbey as a super premium brand, and we must not cheapen that. So in 2020, we're launching another brand, looking to appeal to consumers we don't currently reach. Say hello to Brutus T Bubbles and the Tiny Bubbles line of live sour beer in a can. We're going to take all the equity and knowledge we've learned making Lost Abbey beers. We're bringing to life a Gose-style beer, finished with Brettanomyces, and all the while we're going to have fun promoting our new friend Brutus. He will become the mascot for what is next and hopefully guide us to new opportunities. In short, he brings his own true north. All we know about him is that he's a Renaissance bubble and he's looking for a good time. This is our authentic alternative. Start with something new and let it find its own true north. Where did this idea come from? Well, it was actually a small batch of beer that was produced by Hollister Brewing Company for many years and is one of the first Gose-style beers to be produced in California. In September, we bought the rights to this brand. I guess that means we did a craft-on-craft deal. Justin. It's easy to forget that running a business means opportunity is everywhere, and we thought this was a great opportunity for us. I think the challenge of staying in the beer business, the craft beer business at this very moment, is going to be defined by authentic alternatives. I know we've struggled with this for the past couple of years, and today I'm proud to say I know where our compass needs to be headed, and we're charting new courses. True North has never been more challenging for all of us. I only hope grunge shows up soon so we can all go back to playing rock and roll, and only this time we can take the stage with a lot less makeup. Cheers.
Well, that was awesome.
You think?
Yeah.
All right.
I feel like we've got a lot to talk about.
Damn.
Are we uncomfortably close together right now?
No, I can hold your hand.
I'm sorry I couldn't get you the Poison walk-up music.
I asked for some walk-up music. I wanted to talk dirty to me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So you're breaking some news on the stage here.
Yep.
This deal sort of flies under the radar?
I think so. I mean, it wasn't like we bought a brewery. We just bought a brand, right? I mean, is that how this works?
Yeah, but it's such a cool name. Like, is Don Ho going to come looking for you now?
I hope
his
not.
Estate?
I mean, his estate, yeah. We talked about it. We're definitely staying away from the Hawaii-ness of it.
Yeah.
And the beer's been made for many years, so we shouldn't have issues.
Yeah.
I hope not.
So how do you lean into this?
The thing is that we've got a lot of equity with the Lost Abbey brand and a lot of the innovation and experimentation and things. And I think what we wanted to do was make sure that we protected the real premiumness of the Abbey brand and wanted to continue to think about how to get some of these beers to market. And, it's no surprise right now that 13-year-old brands aren't doing well. I mean, 300-year-old brands aren't doing well, right?
Right.
So maybe for us, flipping the script on coming to market with something that is already in the market, but at the same time we can bring a new energy to it, is where we're going to live.
Mm-hmm. This seems to be a little bit of reverse engineering, though, because you're allowing the brand to sort of figure itself out.
I think what was cool and what really appealed to me was when I went to go purchase the brand was that it didn't really have any noise around it. I mean, it was a brew pub based beer. The name Tiny Bubbles, was brewed once a year. It didn't have a lot of backstory to it. It didn't have images and things that we had to kind of overcome. It was an idea conceptually that I knew we could execute, and in order to do that, we just needed the rights to the name.
So I guess when you are reverse engineering this, who are you targeting? I know it's people who aren't currently drinking, but what do they look like?
So for us, the biggest thing was we knew we weren't going to put Lost Abbey sour beers in a can. And so this is going to be a canned beverage, of course. It's a very obvious statement these days. We're going to target a generation of people or a youthfulness that we don't have. And the hope is that we can have fun, and you can see in Brutus that he is fun. The Abbey brand has a lot different look and feel to it. So we're going to chase people that like fun things.
Fun things.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
Well, is there enough fun in the beer industry at the moment?
Currently?
Yeah.
I don't know. We're sitting up here talking about it.
Are you guys having fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about the craft playbook. Is that out the window at this point?
I mean, there's definitely some real weird shit going on. I think about like evolutions and progression, and we're 40 years in, right? And you think about legacy breweries and what that means. And I think for us, what the point of my talk was really just what are you going to do to get out of this? Because I'm not sure that doing what you've been doing is going to get you anywhere. I wanted to and I didn't talk about it, but there's a lot of collaborations going on right now, but I don't know that the collaborations are doing anything for the industry. I think people are using them as a kind of a crutch, and it's just kind of a, we're cool because we brought these guys in, but that's not a strategy. That's just kind of a day by day. It's kind of a wing it, right?
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it. Yeah, maybe.
So I want to reiterate, Tommy laid out a lot to talk about. So if you have questions, fire away at us. Send them up to me. I'll ask them on your behalf. So you talked a little bit about, the 7 deadly sins, and we can't help but talk about Ballast Point at this point. It's like the prodigal son coming home, right? So this is the first time, I believe, that there's been a brand that's come back from being excommunicated to you're in the family again.
So we did talk about this yesterday. So 2 deals went down in the last 2 days, and both those deals are the second time that those breweries have been sold. And then now what you're speaking to is that one of them is actually coming back into being a craft brewer. That's
right.
A very interesting sense of spin cycle.
So how does that play out?
I think for me as a business owner, the thing that I'm most excited about is that the people that have been struggling, I think, at Ballast and that are still there are very excited about a new opportunity. I saw a lot of the tweets and just the energy in social media from people that are excited to go to work again. And I struggle with that as a business owner, that if you do end up transitioning your company away, what are you leaving your employees with? And that's definitely a sense of a lot of this M&A activity that's going on right now is the new owner coming on board going to be better for them? I was reading before this talk that, Anderson Valley seems pretty excited about their new opportunities as well.
Yeah. So we got a couple of questions here. What, if any, affiliation will Tiny Bubbles have to the Lost Abbey from a marketing perspective?
I think for us, we've decided it's its own thing. It's going to stand alone, but at the same time, it's kind of one of those situations where it's brought to you by the same people that made that, but they will not end up on the same cut sheet. They will not be on the same page.
And you'll produce, obviously, in-house?
Yeah. It won't say on the back of the can produced, Lost Abbey Brewing Company. It's going to have its own marker.
Yeah. So now that you have a new brand in today's market, how do you approach marketing from a cost, budget, and strategic approach?
That's a great question. We have 4 brands, and they don't have a unique marketing budget. We have a marketing department, but they each don't have their own. Although I suspect that because of the energy we're putting into this new release and this new brand, that we will probably elevate the amount of spend that we would make for something like this to really focus on the launch and ensure that we get this out there. We've hired a design firm. I want to thank Dylan Jones for all the great work he's done so far, and look forward to more.
Do we have this? This is the second part of that question. Do we have to market to launch brands now that good liquid isn't good enough?
Well, I think for us, that's part of our true, our authentic alternative here is that we know we're going to make this a great liquid. This is not just a brand being marketed under some kitschy, campy little cool mascot guy, and that's going to win. We're basically coming at this with, we're going to bring kick-ass liquid, and we're going to have something that sits on the shelf and just looks right.
Yeah. Several other legacy brewers are getting into other beverage spaces for the same reasons. They often have fear of losing street cred. Did you discuss this when you were making the decision?
Well, I think for me, when we bought this brand, it was about street cred. I thought that we were going to be able to bring it to market and make it as authentic and as real as it could be. And I think that that's something we've talked about. It's going to be natural. It's not going to have concentrate, or it's not going to have artificial extracts and things like that. We're trying to make this a real brewer's beer.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you play a role in removing a stigma for many other breweries in getting into those spaces?
I think we don't worry about that. I think for us, we just worry about what do we need to be focused on to continue to tell our story that we're great at making awesome, uniquely flavored beers, and the rest of the world can do what it wants to do. I think for me, part of the reason for the speech today was to really stand up and say that everybody has to figure it out on their own, and that's where we're all headed. But what I really wanted to kind of resonate with today was if you make bad decisions right now because you're doing it out of fear, then you're going to have to deal with that later. So the authentic alternative is something that we're going to really embrace and be very focused on. Does that fit the ethos of what we're about? And it's always about great beer.
So you talked a little bit about I guess for the existing brands, and you talk about being stuck in a rut, like the industry being stuck in a rut and not changing, doing the same thing with the similar brands. So you've got 3 existing brands. What do you do with those brands? How do they evolve at this time?
I think it allows us to clean things up a little bit, because now we don't have to say we need this because that's what the market's doing. We can say, okay, maybe our Lost Abbey position is more about getting smaller and getting more, really diving into more experimental beers and things, and that's what the Abbey brand is. I think after 13 years of being in the market and having the market changed as much as it has, that the important part for us is to say that what we used to do may not be the way that we should be doing that next year. And in order to do that, you have to have different opportunities in order to segment those pieces. And the one segment that we didn't have at this point in time was a canned sour beer, even though that's what the world wants from the Lost Abbey.
Yeah. So you mentioned we're running out of middle-aged white dudes as customers. When do we worry, and how do we address that when there are mostly middle-aged white dudes with beards as brewery owners?
It's $1 million question.
It is. That's why we're here.
I think we're in it. I mean, I think that's the issue, right? I think that we're seeing such a migration away. Do we have we had a defendable line, right? When Kim, stood up on stage and said 10% and then 20%, that was our big, hairy, audacious goal. There was a goal. And I'm not sure what the industry goal is right now, other than potentially to stay in business, right? Remain a viable thing. But ultimately, we're going to have to decide as a group, what is that next goal? And is it something that we can defend as we move forward?
So when do those talks start?
They probably should have started last week.
They should have. Yeah. They should have started last year.
For sure. I didn't put in my notes, and I don't want to belabor this, but I think it's been interesting to watch some of the transitions occur, because there's a big vacuum, I think, that might come to bear, and that is if we lose a lot of this heavy-hitting leadership because they're no longer on the island, or they've been banished to the island, where are we going to get the next level of leadership in that is going to set that agenda and do it without having with a real sense of conviction? I think it was easy to say we want to go from 10% to 20% because you could see how we were going to get there, right? That was the playbook, that was the talk. Here's what we have to do to achieve it. We've got to get into more C-stores, we've got to find more volume. You could figure that out. But what number are we going to defend if seltzer becomes a big thing? What number are we going to agree that we want to that's the line in the sand we need to keep heading towards? Mm-hmm. And I think there might become a big craft leadership vacuum, that might develop if we're not careful.
You mentioned current consumers are some of the most uneducated that you've encountered. Any thoughts on perhaps why they are bored with the current market?
Yeah, I guess when we were doing this and we were doing it well, we were basically preaching to the choir, right? And then all of a sudden, the choir is educated, and then we move on to the next and the next and the next. And I kind of have this theory in my head that we're running about a C+ right now with the consumers in terms of their education level. But it's challenging because they don't seem to have a want to educate themselves. When I was getting into craft beer, I had to learn voraciously everything I could about all these different styles in order to execute them, taste them, sample them, learn about them, and they don't seem to have that appetite for self-education that existed. We had to be in charge of our own discoveries, and they just seem to kind of have this one sense of sameness, and I think part of that is this hazy thing that's kind of going on right now.
Mm-hmm. So on hard seltzer, can it be craft?
I think you're going to see a lot more of it. I'm not.
But can it be a
crafted
considered
thing?
A craft
God, I don't know. I cut from my talk, but I was laughing because I was trying to think about, how does one even go about writing a contract for dextrose, or how does one even go about selecting lots of dextrose, or, we fly to Yakima to meet with our hop farmers and we talk about all the improvements they've made, but I don't even know what kind of improvements you make with frickin' processing corn sugar. I really don't. So I don't know. Can it be? Yeah, I suppose, but, if it has to be, it has to be.
I think that's probably where we're headed, and let's see.
My mom didn't send you a question?
Yeah, if we get one more in before the end of the buzzer. Why is it important for craft to have a shared line in the sand?
I just think you have to have, I mean, you have to have some motion, right? You have to have an end zone, a definition. You need to know where you're going. And we've always had one, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges right now is I don't feel like we currently know where we're supposed to draw that line.
Right. That was awesome. Thank you all for sending those questions. Thank you, Tommy. Cheers. Thank you so much.
Cheers, bud.